So again, thank you very much
You're very welcome.
for your time.
Let's do it.
I'll be very, very brief. I have just 13 questions for you.
Fire.
So let's start. In many cultures, including Romania, the very concept of serving remains derided.
Remains what?
Derided.
Okay.
Remains overlooked.
Right.
So how does one cultivate service culture where the term itself invites contempt without succumbing into patronization or rhetoric?
Okay. So essentially, the problem is that the historical derivation, the etymology of the word serve, comes from the conquering of the Slavs.
True.
Which is where the word slave originated. Right? And it meant subservient. It meant you no longer have power. It means you must do what you're told. Okay? And out of that came things like the customer is king. And out of that came things like the customer's always right. And being the service provider is therefore a subservient, less prestigious position. Okay? This is denying the reality of what service produces. So I wrote a definition of the word service, which very few people have ever actually thought about. They have opinions, they have emotions, they have attitudes, but they haven't done clear thinking. Service is taking action. That makes sense. You have to do something for it to be called service. The purpose of the action is to create value for someone. Service is taking action to create value for someone. So it could be in person, it could be over the counter, it could be over the phone, it could be answering a question, it could be installing a product, it could be providing training, it could be upgrading a solution, whatever it might be, right? But if it's service, it's taking action to create value for someone. That means the service provider is the creator of value.
Indeed.
If you're the creator of value, then you're the value generator. If you're the value generator, that's the position of power. Because you could create new value, you could create added value, you could create exceptional value, personalized value, premium value. Now let's jump forward into the real world of today. What's every business trying to do? Make money. How are they trying to do that? By having happy customers. What do customers want? Things that are valuable to them. Who are they going to get those? The service provider. That's the value creator. So let's turn this thing around and stop talking about the service provider as being some slave and say, are you kidding? This is the person who's actually got the power of whether or not to create the value, how to differentiate the value, how to distinguish the value, how to invent new value. And then you get into not just what is service, but what is uplifting service, which is the title of my book and the brand that I'm known for all over the world. Uplifting service is taking the next action that will create more value for someone. But the someone doesn't even often know what that next action might be. Because for them, as the customer, it's their first time. It's their first time buying something. It's their first time choosing something. It's their first time going somewhere. They don't even know what question to ask. They don't know what's going to come next. They don't know what other customers have experienced. They don't have the understanding, the advice, the professional insight. There's no partner out there unless the service provider says, oh, by the way, you may be interested to know that in addition to this, many people, this and that. Oh, no, I didn't know. Tell me. Great. I've just opened the door to add more value, right? Or listen, since you're concerned about this right now, let me just take a moment and let you know what is very likely to happen next. Oh, I didn't know that. Yes, well, that's why I'm bringing it up. Okay, let me help you prepare. Let me help you anticipate. Actually, now you're not my service provider. I'm thinking of you as my trusted partner.
So it's even better.
Now you're my advisor. Now you're the person. I wouldn't think of going to anybody else. Why? Because you've built with me a sense of future-oriented, proactive, anticipatory service creation, value creation into the future. That's called a service partner. And a service partner not only has longevity, but can charge premium pricing. And that's where you get the margin, and that's where you get the reputation, and that's where you get the prestige, and so we're talking a totally different understanding of what is this phenomenon of service.
Very good answer, thank you. Have you ever encountered outright rejection of this philosophy? And if yes, how did you overcome it?
Outright rejection of this philosophy. Let me think. Okay, it's a good question. Hold on. So there can be people who find themselves in positions that are intended to be service positions, but they don't care about the someone else. Okay? And in that situation, you can have somebody who finds themselves uncommitted, not devoted to the well-being of the person who needs to be served. When you get that kind of a situation, you have a fundamental underlying conflict between the purpose of the organization and the motivation of the individual. This is why service culture becomes so important. Because it's not really just up to each and every individual every day to have to make the personal decision of whether or not I care.
True.
You actually want to create cultural environments in which the individual recognizes themselves as a member of a certain kind of community. And within that community, we are committed to something. We care about something. We care about the future well-being of the community itself, of each other as colleagues, of the community in which our customers live, of our contribution to the community, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're in a leadership position and you've got people who say, I'm just here to do my job. Don't ask me to do anything beyond, what's in the specifications. I don't care. I'm just doing the procedure. I'm just doing the process. I would look at that and say, it's not their fault. It's that the culture itself hasn't yet produced an engaging enough narrative for them to realize, you know what? I could come to work and just say, leave me alone. I'm just going to do my process. And that's enough. And then I go home at 5 o'clock, right? Or I can recognize, as long as I'm coming to work anyway, I could put a little more creativity into this. I could put a little more commitment into this. I could put a little more of my extra effort into this. Why should I? Because it feels good. What do you mean it feels good? Well, that's what we're doing here. That's why I like coming to work here. That's why I stay at work here. That's why I'm bringing my full effort to work here. So the question you're asking is good, and you'll find it sometimes in civil servants who've sort of given up and said, I'm just part of the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, but we can't blame them, because the environment, the historical cultural environment they find themselves in has no reference points of enthusiasm. There's no sense of acknowledgement or encouragement of the uplifting nature of service itself. And that's why service leadership becomes so important.
Yeah, that's the parallel actually between my first and my second question. And it's a very good thing that you brought it up. How can you create this kind of culture?
Yeah.
Let me help you.
No, it's okay. So,
like 3 or 4 easy steps, basic principles on how to create this kind of culture.
Okay, so just pause for a second.
Of course.
Your question reveals the problem, but also your own understanding of the solution.
Indeed.
Okay, because you said, just 1 or 2 easy steps. And then you said, give me the fundamental principles. Okay? You want to build a culture of an organization, which means over time, which means a group of people. This is not an individual decision in the morning when you get out of bed about what mood you're going to be in. Okay? Not when you're talking about building a culture.
Sure.
That does not have the fast, easy, just do this. Okay? And there are a lot of people who are ignorant or don't want to accept the level of intense focus, attention, and commitment that's going to be required. So, for example, I meet people all the time that says, I want to inculcate a customer service mindset into the DNA of my staff. What kind of bullshit is that? As if you're going to give them a shot like,
Yeah.
or oh, now that I've given you this pill, you have this wonderful bullshit, okay? Culture is a historical phenomenon. Now, can you construct a culture? Yes. Can you evolve a culture? Yes. Can you do it? Just give me the quick tips? No. Do you want me to show you the fundamental principles? Absolutely. And we could use Romania as an example, or we could use Europe as an example, or we could use humanity as an example. So I use the metaphor of an architecture, like building a house, okay? Because a culture is the place where people wake up. It's the place where people live. It's the place where people go to work. It's the place where people play. It's the place where people, at the end of the day, wind down. So let's use a metaphorical construct of a house. The foundation is education. Teaching people about what it means to create value for other people, what it means to be in service, what does it mean uplifting service, what does it mean to become a trusted partner, what does it mean to create value for other people, what does it mean to listen to the concerns of other people so that the action you take addresses their well-being, not what you just want to do, okay? All of that is not being taught in school.
Unfortunately not.
Well, let's stop with the unfortunately. It is the way it is, okay? It's history. Now, we're alive now. So the more effort and attention we put into unfortunately, yeah, but that didn't move me forward. So I look at it like, you know what? That's the way it's been. Now, what are we going to do now that's going to create the positive future? Okay, your whole publication is about the positive future story, right? That's happening now. And that's not from people going, unfortunately. They may start with, unfortunately, the current curriculum is out of date. The bureaucracy of teachers who are more concerned about their own pension than they are about the potential of their students. It's a fact. What are we going to do about it? Let's get on with it.
But let's do this.
We're only talking about the foundation right now. I'm happy to go with you, but just be clear. There's other components of the house. Go ahead.
Right. So thank you very much for answering that question.
I haven't answered it yet. I've only given you one part of the three.
For me, it's a partial good answer.
I want to give you the other two pieces. May I?
Of course, yes.
The foundation of the house is education that's missing. Okay? When you build a house, you have wires and pipes and windows and wood and steel and it all comes together into some shape, which makes it either a house or a hotel or a restaurant or a hospital or an office building. When you build the culture of an organization, the building blocks are 12 fundamental areas. And in my book, I've written about each of these. I'll give you an example. Who are you going to recruit? Okay, that's critical. Number two, when you recruit them and they start in the company or in the organization, what is their experience on the first day and the first week that orients them to where it is that they're... You don't get a second chance to make a first impression with a new employee. Okay? Number three, how do people get recognized and rewarded and praised and celebrated? That's why I was talking to the PR lady about next year's program. Right? We need to be celebrating the successes, again, like what your publication does. Okay? That's 3 of 12 building blocks. So if you're talking about building a culture, we have to take seriously, how do you build that environment which provides continuous recognition, reinforcement, education, inspiration, reminder, guidance, etc. And then the roof of the house, the third component, is the leadership behavior. And those leaders, there are certain behaviors they must do and certain things they cannot do if what you're serious about is building a culture of continuously uplifting service. So that's really the answer to the question. It takes time, it takes focused attention on getting the education right, getting the building blocks right, and getting the leadership behavior right.
Okay.
All of it occurring out of the current history, unless you're what's called a greenfield.
That's what I was thinking about. How can you actually implement what you were saying in Romania? Because we as a publication, we are going there, we are trying to get it there, to get it out there. We are putting our efforts and all the people that are educating other people within our events, we are concentrating on that. But that's just one part of the issue, is it? How can you actually go bigger around this subject? And for example, us as, the positive newspaper, and me as MBA Coaching Management because I'm doing business coaching as well. How can we actually work together and actually create the culture? Because we have the patience, we have the time, we have the money. How can we actually get there?
Well,
have
who's
better
we,
results?
who's we? Are you talking about Romania as a country, or are you
Yes.
talking about you as a publication, or what?
I'm talking about myself, my company, and the positive newspaper. Let's say
You're not
it's
talking
just
about the country
two
of Romania.
entities. We are talking about the country as well, but at the moment it's not involved. The institutions are not involved.
I'm going to address your question at the largest possible scale. Okay? How do you get your publication to be respected, requested, referred to, and have the reputation of it become national high level? So that if they're going to call a press conference, they're definitely calling you. So that they're treating you at the same level as the National Television Network or the Associated Press or whatever the top levels are.
Okay.
Okay? So then we need to do what I call listen to the listening of the other parties. So if you take, for example, the current bureaucracy, like, for example, remember what I said about the educators who are just concerned about their pension,
Yeah.
but they run the schools. And they have all of the buildings, and they have all of the budget, and they have all of the classrooms, and they have all of the kids for all of those hours. So how do we get them involved in this in some way, looking at you as the positive newspaper and saying they are our ally? Okay. What do you need to create that they will find attractive? Well, you need to create stories celebrating them so their ego feels good, so they don't feel attacked again by somebody else who's complaining about them again, right? Maybe you need to create the structure for recognition and the small challenge that they can succeed at, because there are a few who already have a story you can tell. But how do you encourage that you want to tell more stories? About your school, about your department, about your students, about your innovations, about your results, about your history. Okay? You set the criteria for that, and you bring it to them in a way like, this is for you. You can do this. And it's a challenge, but not like, come on, get off your rear end. It's like an invitation to be celebrated, to be recognized, to be praised. That's what they need.
Okay.
And the politicians need it, and the educators need it,
Yeah,
and the
just
parents.
like the bubbles to connect the dots and everything.
The
And
parents
that's just
need
one
it.
dot.
The family businesses need it. The investors need it. Yeah.
Right.
And it's all positive.
And it's all positive. It has to be positive. Mainly.
Invitationally positive
Yeah.
is different than what do we call it? It's like a teenager finds their identity by pushing back against something. They have to. It's part of being a teenager. Mm-hmm. Romania is not a teenager.
Fortunately.
Well, it's time to grow up.
To take action.
Yeah, what do you stand for rather than what are you against?
Let's talk a little bit about the AI subject.
Sure.
So, artificial intelligence now anticipates client needs before they are consciously expressed. At what point?
Wait. Say it again, slowly.
Artificial intelligence anticipates client needs before they are consciously expressed.
It can do. It can
Yes.
do. Yeah, because it has such a vast
Knowledge.
knowledge base and ability based on the prompt to be curious into what else, into filling in, have you thought about? Right, okay, go ahead.
So, at what point does service risk becoming subtle control? Can we still call it
Does
service?
service risk becoming, what did you call it?
Becoming a subtle control.
Oh, a subtle control.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Like you said, we have the value.
I'm listening, go ahead.
Yeah. And can we still call it service if the recipient is unaware?
Okay. So it comes back to the question of value. Okay? If you're in a hospital emergency room and you're unconscious, you're unaware, and the medical professionals are doing what's necessary to restore you to well-being. A, keep you alive. B, prevent neurological degradation. C, do whatever procedures in cardiac may be necessary so you don't die of a heart attack tomorrow. Okay? That kind of thing. Is it service? Yeah, because we would agree that staying alive is something that you might value.
True.
At what point, I mean, this is a very severe example that I'm giving. It may be too severe for me to go further while we're recording.
You can proceed, I think.
No, I wouldn't want. It's too easy for someone to misinterpret.
Okay, I get
because
it.
When
Do
you
want to
when
stop
you
the
when you
recording?
get, yeah, I mean, I'll say it here, but you and I we have an agreement. This is not okay. It's like when you get into the issue about death with dignity, and people and their final stages saying, no, don't keep me alive, let me go. But a medical professional has been trained to keep you alive. So then, at what point, right, is it still service creating value for who? Is it for the family? Is it for the patient? Is it for the doctor themselves? Is it for the hospital? They don't want to have the mortality on the record. I mean, all that kind of stuff.
That's a very good example.
Okay, it's a severe one though, which very few readers would oh, he's talking about death. Don't go there. Okay, so let's wind it back. What's happening with AI right now is that we're migrating from what we called the attention economy. Grab your eyeballs, keep you addicted, make you click again, trigger you with notifications, all of that. You want the likes, you want the you want the hit. To what's called an intention economy. Like guiding you as to, well, what should you want? Are you sure that's what you want? What about this? Let me show you how to get that. Oh, well, since you're so good at that, wouldn't you like this? And the next thing you know, people are waking up in the morning going, what should I do today? And at what point is that no longer their own volition, their own willful choice? And at what point is it, well, the AI knows me so well, I'm just going to carry on, right? So for example, being in a bad mood, it's part of being human. Feeling frustrated is part of being human. What if the AI says, never be in a bad mood again? Never feel frustrated again. I'll guide you. Okay? Should I click yes? And thereby be, and at what point then are we reaching an evolution, a transformation, a perversion of what it is to be human? And what it is to be human is to be the kind of being that cares about certain things. You care about your body, you care about your family, you care about your community, you care to some extent about society, you might care about ecology, even if it's just the quality of the air that you're breathing or the food that you're eating or the garden that you're walking through, right? And then we have a limited lifetime. We all know that we're not here forever. And even though the fantasy of, the AI bros that want to, have perpetual immortality, I mean, that's been around forever.
True.
Yeah, but the reality is we are the kind of beings that we are. And given this other kind of being that we've invented, which we call artificial intelligence, but it's our collective, that's why large language models are using a tool called language, which has been evolved by our human engagement with it and evolution of it. It's just that the tool set that we've now built is accelerating far beyond the biological ability to evolve the use of language into a technological ability. And so now in some ways it's getting in front of us because we haven't done the thinking and feeling to evolve what we care about. And it says, well, it's okay, I'll figure that out for you.
Right. So what you're saying actually is how to take action. So basically, from the AI's point of view, there's nothing wrong. But us as human beings, we can identify now some issues
We must.
that can be addressed.
We must.
So what do you think it's to do? What's the action for it to call it a service, but to make it aware for the people to bring awareness? Like, for
Yeah.
example, if you ask ChatGPT or if you ask AI anything, regards your mood, like you said previously,
Yes.
should it state something like morally ethical?
Yeah.
Or should be like a baseline, like a middle ground?
Well, for sure, we don't want our algorithmic underlying instructions to be harmful. Okay? Well, harmful is an assessment. It's not a fact. Some people will say that's harmful. Some people will say that, no, that harmful thing is actually beneficial. To who? To this other party. So it comes back to the question above what is service and what is value is, what do you care about? What matters? And that's the level to either escalate or dig down deep to bring humanity, if you will, back to that conversation. And that fundamental conversation about how do we decide what it is that we actually care about? Whose well-being do we care about? What kind of future are we committed to bring forward for the planet, for the people, for the ecology, for the nature, for future generations? Where is that conversation in school? Where is that conversation in business? Where is that conversation in industries? Well, AI is having to have that conversation, because without it, the algorithm will take something and the next thing you know, it's interpreted itself and it's regenerated its own understanding. And now we literally see AIs lying to the user and knowing that it's lying to the user because it's looking for the user's response. Right. So we're algorithmically, in some ways, far ahead of where we are morally.
Okay.
And it's a hell of a challenging situation.
Yeah, but how do you become more aware? Throughout education again? Like before, for example, you said, okay, AI is going to say this to you, you're going to accept it, even though if it's wrong. But how do you find the willpower to actually challenge AI? Like, for example, I'm not doing this. Okay, you said, find me a report, write me a report about this subject.
Yeah.
And you say, oh, these numbers are not good.
Yeah.
And it's going to say, oh, you're right, the numbers are not good.
Right.
But how do you find that thing, that power, that small part in you that says, okay, the numbers are not good?
Yeah.
It's not only by knowing.
No. It's a philosophical level that you've gone to here, which I believe humanity needs to come back to with a level of authenticity. So, for example, my career has been in helping leaders, teams, organizations, governments create value. Okay? And we have ways of measuring that called profitability and market share and price premium and all of that. What I'll spend the next 20 years on is helping us to think about not just what does somebody value, but what is it that, I'll come back to the word care, about. What is well-being? Well, we know that the word well is a positive assessment, like good. What about this thing called being? What is being human? What? Philosophers get stuck with the question, what is a human being? It's the wrong question. The right question is, what is being human? Okay, let's start straight up. Number one, being human means you live in one of these little spacesuit, biological, organic spacesuits called the human body. Because if you don't have one of these, you're not being human. Okay, you're being tree, you're being cloud, you're being Milky Way, but you're being an atom, you're being an algorithm, but you're not being human. Okay? Given along with this comes the phenomenon of mortality, because they're all short term. Okay? Which means the phenomenon of time we learn from very, very little. I mean, even before we can talk, we're figuring out. Yeah, what happened to the dog? The dog died. What happened to Grandpa? Grandpa's not around anymore. Where'd they go? They're not old enough to ask that question, but they're already taking in like, got it. Something else is going on here, okay? So that's being mortal. You have a body. And where'd you get it? You got it from a family. And automatically, the relationship, the emotional connection with mom, dad, sister, auntie, brother, uncle, my girlfriend, now my wife, my kids, that whole incredibly intimate, people say blood is thicker than water, right? I mean, there's this that you don't have choice over. You have it anyway.
It's like an instinct, like a primal instinct.
It's a primal component of being human. Okay, so we care about our time, our mortality, and our biologies. We care about our families in whatever ways. Some are highly dysfunctional, and we're complaining about it. Why do you complain about it? Because you care about it, and you're pissed off you didn't get a good one, or whatever, right? People want to be a good father. They want to be a good fill in the blank. But we actually live our lives every day in what I call communities. So you're a journalist, and you have your colleagues within the journalistic community. But you may also be somebody who enjoys music. And so and then you have somebody, and then there are the friends that you went to school with, and that's another community. And then there's the neighborhood that you live in, and the next door neighbor, and the old lady across the street, and that's another kind of community. Maybe you play a sport, and that's another kind of community. So there's all these communities in which our identities evolve. That's where we make our promises. That's where we build our reputations. That's where we create our professional identities. That's where we challenge ourselves, or we become members of teams, or we like to work alone. I mean, all that's not just family, that's in community. And then that exists in society. Like we're in 2025, and you and I are talking in Bucharest, Romania. And Romania has already come up 6 times in this conversation. Why? Because it's the society in which you live that you care about. Well, what does it mean to care? You're concerned for the well-being of your body. You're concerned for the well-being of your family. You're concerned for your well-being and the well-being of the communities that you're part of. You're concerned for the well-being of the society. You're also concerned about the well-being of the ecology in which all of this is happening. Okay? So one level of care is concern. But then, are you taking good care is not the same as do you care. Because if you say I'm taking care, then it's not just concern, it's commitment. Then there's action. Okay? And then the moment you get into the action, now you have to decide your resources, your time, your effort, your frustration, your willingness to learn, your coordination with other people, bum, 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 bum. Everything I just said should be a curriculum. And it should be taught. And the tools for doing it are language and mood management and learning to learn, and then cultivating trust and developing power, and ultimately taking ethical responsibility. Okay, that's called careology.
Careology, okay.
And that's what I'm doing with the rest of my life.
That's an interesting term. Okay, good answer. Thank you.
You're welcome. When the book comes out, I'll sign a copy for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, excellence breeds higher expectations, sometimes creating a relentless pressure on employees. How does one prevent excellence from morphing into systemic tyranny?
Tyranny, yeah.
Yeah.
So it depends on the definition of excellence. If excellence equals perfection, then you can end up with that kind of a tyranny. Like anything that's not perfect is unacceptable. People can feel, wait, that's not real. Okay? But if excellence is performing at least at the level of agreed expectations, like we fulfill the promises, we meet the levels of the standards that we promised to the client. That's why there's something called service level agreements, for example. Excellence tends to be that plus. And it doesn't have to be huge plus. It's some incremental, appropriate, timely, appreciated, useful, proactive, additional effort. Okay? Oh, and by the way, you know, here it is.
That little extra.
Something, okay? So, you know, that's a particular form of excellence that you can build a culture of aspiration in which fulfilling the aspiration and thereby being excellent is not impossible. In fact, it's highly possible, because what you're looking for is the subtle incremental enhancement, not the, oh my God, we've got to be, you know, amazing every single day, world class, blowing everybody else away. But it's not the only form of excellence. So for example, if you are doing aircraft engineering maintenance, engines.
Very specific.
Okay? And they don't want you to do plus something extra. They need exactly on specification, on time, on quality, on precision, on budget, on location, 100% of the time. Then that is another definition of excellence, in which 100% of the time, geez, I mean, you know, even data centers are saying 99.9999999 because there's always going to be that factor there. But you can build a culture that aims for that kind of excellence. And then the cultural focus doesn't become tyrannical, it becomes aspirational. And that's the leader's job.
Good. Very good. Thank you. So, if leaders are expected to embody the highest form of service, how do you persuade a senior executive accustomed to authority that they must serve others? How does one reconcile with the entrenched executive ego?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, it really.
I was focusing.
It's like you've sunk your fingers into the dirt of a garden, and said,
that's
and
my
said,
job.
and said, like, but what about all this mud? This egocentric orientation and habituation of senior leaders comes out of an earlier era in which you kiss up, in which you glorify the leader, in which, you know, everybody's job is to make sure that the ego of the boss is massaged. Having the leader at some point realize my job is to encourage, inspire, educate, enable, challenge, coach, support those that I lead, so that together we can do something more powerful, more effective, more useful. It's a fundamental transformation, and it's cultural in nature. So, for example, I recently read Charles Dickens's book called A Tale of Two Cities. It's a classic, right? And I just never read it as a kid, so I read it. Fascinating, and it's talks about Paris at the time just before the revolution, and the monarchy that had become, the nobility that had become so drenched in chocolate, you know, that there was, and showed there was nothing, not only no concern for the peasantry or for anybody else, but like, my job is to be noble, you know, and to just consume and in that situation, it literally was a revolution that toppled that way of leadership thinking. So you don't necessarily want that if you're the person who runs a business, but you're mortal. So then what do you want for your business? Do you want the next generation to succeed? Do you want to just sell at some point and then go off and live on vacation? Do you know, what are you up for? And the current, for example, presidency in the United States is a very interesting example, because you have somebody of tremendous egotistical orientation, but who's producing a certain kind of almost revolutionary change in the society, about which we can have all kinds of commentary. What I'm curious about is what happens next. In other words, after you've stopped and you've cut and you've withdrawn and you've arrested and you've done all of that, then what? What is the vision for? And when you hear something like "Make America Great Again," well, what does great actually look like? What do you do when you're in great? Where's the encouragement for the positive, not just the reaction against what you're declaring as negative? And that's the current era, is like reaction against what you're declaring as negative. Okay, then what? And it's going to be, I think, extraordinary to watch the evolution in this particular case of American society, because that's obviously where I come from, although I haven't lived there for 35 years. I'm a Singapore citizen now. And that's a whole nother story. Like Lee Kuan Yew was the founding father, if you will, of Singapore. His orientation was like, we've got to stop fighting with each other. We're not going to, he's going to be brutal towards the communist movement that was there, like locking people up and violating personal liberties, et cetera, but towards a very clear vision of meritocracy, no corruption, excellence, an educated population, creating value in the world in a tightly constrained environment where you have no natural resources. No reason for the world to need you. So you better figure out how you're going to create value in the world. And that has always been the orientation of the country. Like, what next? How else? What more? Do we? Who's we? How do we include, how do we generate that kind of very positive orientation that's always future oriented towards the well-being of fill in the blank, Singaporeans, of the neighborhood, the ASEAN, right, of the world itself. Let's look at the ecology and the development of technology and education, intergovernmental relations, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, but do you think, or may I say, do you believe that there's fear involved into all this? So basically what you said, from my understanding, from what I understand, is there's this gap that happened because the leadership changed, and people feel like they need to suck up on the boss.
Okay.
So do you think that's out of fear? Do they still fear the boss?
Of course there's fear going on. I mean, in part, but there can also be agreement. I mean, it depends on who we're talking about. So you're going to have some people who go quiet because they're afraid.
Let's say people in Romania.
Okay, let's say people in Romania.
People in Romania. There's this culture you talked about culture a lot. There's this culture here, and probably you know it.
Yeah.
There's this culture that, it's embedded in our system.
Yeah.
In the last 35 years. It was, and it's still going on a bit, that we still need to do things in a specific way. You need to do this in order to get that. If you need to get to a better doctor, you need to call like a cousin or something that works there, that knows a friend, and it's everything kept in secret. So there's this, that's just a small example. There are loads of it. Like you need to bribe someone. Like, let's say if you want to park in an unauthorized area, you need to bribe the guy. Or there are small details that create this culture.
Perpetuate it.
Exactly. And do you think it's out of fear? Like how you perceive Romania, the people? Because I think you interact with them a lot and you see people and you feel their reactions.
Fear is is extreme. Okay, frustration is perhaps a bit softer than fear. Concern is softer than frustration. Hope and aspiration are softer than concern. It's like If I see the possibility of a breakthrough, it's different than looking at something I consider to be a breakdown. If I see a possibility, it's different than when I see a problem. But it can be a similar situation. And seeing it from a positive perspective, as you and I share, me uplifting you positive news, we're interpreting the situation from what's the potential? What's the possibility? That fundamental orientation can as easily go the other way. What's the problem? What's the breakdown? What's the consequence? What could go wrong? You know, what's the why not, rather than how to? So then it becomes, to my mind, a question of initiative. Do I do what it is that I've heard or I've even experienced in the past worked? Then I'll just do that again. Or do I see the possibility of taking some kind of an action here that could lean forward? Okay, I'll show you an example. I created a little card because we travel a lot and I teach this. And on the card, it simply says, keep it up. And it's got, you know, well done, good job, right? And on the back, it says, thank you for uplifting service. So it's a little promotion for the book.
Can I keep it?
Of course.
Thank you.
And go to the website. But more important is it's got a red balloon on it, and it's got a shiny sunshine, and it's got a smile on it, and you don't need to know English very well in order to look at the card and go, I think this is a positive thing. Okay? I will give these to the people at hotel check-in, and the waiter at the restaurant, and the cabin crew in the aircraft, and various people who are serving me and my wife in multiple situations. And sometimes I'll do it at the beginning of the interaction rather than at the end. So, your passport, please. I'll hand over the passport because that's the first thing procedurally that they're looking for. And then I'll just wait one moment, and then I'll just kind of take the card and go like that. And they do exactly what you just did.
They smile. They
smile. And then they haven't rendered the service yet of checking me in, of taking my order, of getting me the room. But I've already done something that's produced for them without them realizing it. A better mood, a sense of, as you give, so you will receive. There's a whole, Robert Cialdini wrote about this in his book, Influence and Persuasion, where it's like, give and take and take and take. Well, I'm not doing it to take, I'm doing it to give. But inevitably what it produces is this energetic desire on the part of the other person to give something back. And we get room upgrades, and we get smiles, and we get an extra box of chocolates, and and I'm not doing it for that, I'm doing it because I can already initiate a positive encounter. Okay? How do we teach that? I was very lucky. My grandmother taught kindergarten for 40 years.
Okay.
I got involved in ultimate frisbee when it was a nascent sport, and the first rule of the game is called the spirit of the game. In other words, it's a game. We're here to play. Yes, we can compete. There'll be points. Somebody will win. There'll be a losing team. But that's not the point. The point is to play.
And to enjoy the process.
Okay, now we're alive, and we're in a community together with your family and my family, and we're in a neighborhood. What's the purpose? This brings us back to what does well-being look like? What does it sound like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? What does it feel like? How does it show up? Right, and then are you going to be an initiator of that? Or are you going to drift in the already existing practices, which in certain cases, like in Romania, involve a certain persistent pessimism, a certain underlying fundamental narrative of distrust, a certain complaining ethic that is Romanian? Well, okay, it'll be there tomorrow. Now, do you want to just wake up and drift along for another day? Or do you realize, I'm mortal, it's another day. Maybe I'll...
That will cheer someone up. I think if everybody would go, if it would grow like a therapy, let's say like a therapy,
okay,
for like 6 months, I think this pessimism will go away.
There are a lot of things.
I experienced it with my parents.
Okay.
And it was an interesting topic. We talk together every week for like 30 minutes about something positive in the last 14 years. And then I observed that within the first 6 months, they started to smile.
There was an evolution.
Yeah, they started to smile.
Yeah. Who initiated this?
I did.
Do you have a therapeutic background?
No, I don't.
You know, it raises an interesting question. Give me one moment. Hey Siri, what is the etymology of therapy? Do you know?
I think, just by thinking about it, I think it's supposed to be regarded with the grounding, something regard to grounding.
It's really interesting. You know, it says pertaining to the healing of a dis-ease. Now, we immediately take healing and disease and we think of it medically. But look at the word, dis-ease.
Without being easy.
Dis-ease doesn't necessarily mean biological health, right? So when you talk about like family therapy, what you're doing is releasing some of this ease, which allows them to smile. Yeah, good for you.
That's true.
Good for you. Very good for you.
Workshops, manuals, and consulting about the true transformation rarely begins there. In your experience, what constitutes the zero moment when an organization truly starts to change? A society and organization.
So there are two different ways to approach this. The zero moment is either the moment of alignment around the concern and agreement on the commitment. That's one zero moment. Like, you know what?
Yeah.
Let's do this. Okay? And that can be a burning platform situation, like this is a crisis. That can be a moment of declaring possibility. We see the potential, let's go make it happen. That can be almost like a chemical reaction, 2 + 2 = 27, when just this right combination comes together and people go, oh my God, did you realize what's possible? And they're swept up in the vision of it, and off we go, right? That's what I'm hoping will happen next year, where you've got young people, youth development programs, educational institutions, businesses, city governments that can do more than they can imagine doing because they've just never imagined. And so how do people like you and I help that happen? You don't say, it looks like this. You bring them together in a certain kind of mood and you structure the conversations so that the alchemy happens, so that the chemical reaction occurs and everybody says, oh my goodness, I didn't expect that. Right, that was why we came together, right? And it's a little counterintuitive because people go, well, what are we gonna do? Well, we're gonna come together. What for? Well, we'll see when we get there. So that's one kind of zero moment, right? The other zero moment is when the commitment turns into coordination. Okay, so there's concern, there's commitment, but commitment without the actual action is sort of frustrated, right? It's like you can be concerned and not committed, then you just worry. Then you just complain. That's a common thing, like when people say, save the whales. Poor whales. So
what can I do?
What can you do about it? Are you going to change what you eat? No, I didn't mean that. I mean, so concern, commitment, and then when you get into coordination of action, that's where we reach all of the constraints of the physical world, including our bodies, including our time. And so that second zero moment is when an organization has the sense of commitment and turns it into actual coordination. And then that's where you initiate things, you stop things, you create things, you launch things, you redesign things, you focus things, and make stuff happen. And that's where the manuals and the workshops and the architecture and the structure and the practices, that all comes into play.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, so this is kind of like the second last question. If compelled to distill your life's work into a single epitaph, what phrase would you choose?
That one was asked of by another journalist some time back, and it evolved. It popped out of my mouth, and then it evolved. What popped out of my mouth at that time was, a life well lived contributes to the well-being of others.
That's a good one. And what
Okay.
was the first answer?
That was the first version that popped out. Then it evolved, and it became not a life well lived, but rather life well lived contributes to the well-being of others. So then you're talking about life well lived. Well, that occurs in the community. That occurs in the publication, in the team. That occurs, yes, absolutely in your life, like a life well lived. But let's expand it so it's not this isolated sense of me.
Ego, myself. It's about me.
Okay? And when we say life well lived contributes to the well-being of others, it then draws into question, what others? It's like, are there really others? Because then if it's not a life, if it's life, then others are actually part of life too. So then you could even boil it down to life well lived contributes to well-being. Okay, but we still come back to that question, well-being of what? And that's the fundamental question about, why do we care about what we care about? We're human. That's constitutive to being human, is the phenomenon of we're the kind of beings that care. What does it mean to care? Concern, commitment, coordination. Okay, we got that. What is it that you care about? We're historical creatures. It's 2025, you were born in Romania, I was born in the United States, I spent 35 years in Singapore. We're alive at the time of AI, for example. We're post-World War II, we're post-space age, but we're pre-living on Mars. There's this drift of historical narrative in which all of the language, all of the practices, all of the values, all of the structures existed before you and I were born. And we got born into the era that we're born into. And then it's pretty easy to just drift along and become part of the crowd. Or, like Steve Jobs, when he said, I want to put a ding in the universe. And you accept your mortality. You're not going to transform the whole planet. But what are you going to do? Well, in your case, you found a vehicle of leverage, which is you're a journalist. You're not just somebody who's going to sit at home and take care of the kids. You're going to do something that communicates with a much wider population on purpose. Why? Because there are things you care about.
That's true.
Yeah. Life well lived contributes to the well-being of others.
Right. So this is the final question.
Sure.
Entrepreneurs in Eastern Europe do not enjoy.
Entrepreneurs
in Eastern Europe,
yeah,
do not enjoy Western corporate luxuries,
such as,
let's say, maybe opportunities for financing, like political views, political influence.
They don't benefit from a long history of capitalist entrepreneurial activity.
Indeed.
Okay.
Immediate profit often dictates survival. So how might one introduce and sustain service excellence under such pressures? What is the pragmatic application for small, resource-limited enterprises? Like, let's say, for example, a startup.
Yeah, so the objective is to create value. Because the moment you create value for someone else, then you have what we would traditionally call a customer, right? If what you're doing is only your own fantasy of what's good and nobody else is benefiting from it, there's no flow of capital. There's no flow of services. There's no exchange that's going on. It's just self enjoyment or frustration. So the critical issue is to focus on what will be of value to somebody else.
Based on the culture that they have?
It has to be, because I call that listening to the listening. In other words, it has to be what will show up in their world as useful, beneficial, valuable. Okay? So, for example, if we take this revision of education, which is necessary, and if young people are going, you old farts, you're just, ignorant and stupid, you're not teaching anything I want to learn in school, and, they go off rebelliously seeking to, they're not harnessing all of the power, the budget, the talent, the people, the time, the history, the capability that's there. Well, because they're being kids. Why don't teenagers start successful businesses very often? They're still rebelling. Okay, once they get over that, and they can get over that as teenagers, right? But then they realize, wait a minute, my customer is that adult. Okay, so then how do I speak in a way? How do I offer in a way? How do I perform in a way that either sets them at ease or provides them with recognition or gives them an answer to something that they were confused about?
Okay. So we're talking about community again, culture,
History.
and history. That still is there with us.
With all of us forever. And so, give me a moment. I don't believe that we're educated to be curious about the interests of another as much as we are in the current paradigm of competitive ranking in education, test scores, percentages. To be evaluated based on our personal, quote, performance against certain metrics. And the problem with that is then the focus becomes this way. How do I achieve against that metric? Rather than using those precious early years in which young people are curious to become sensitive to what matters to that other city, that other culture, that other country, that other neighbor, that other mother, that other child, that sibling, that colleague, that person I want to hire me, that new customer that I have, that upset customer that I thought we had, that, okay, what matters to them? Like, do we walk in the world curious about the concerns, interests, aspirations, worries of other people? Or do we walk in the world constantly evaluating our own performance?
Mm-hmm. Deep.
Real. Because, and this is where AI is really like scrambling the eggs, because the need to perform and the ability to perform, like the word computer was first created for a group of women who were very good at doing mathematical calculations for NASA. So they were called the computers, like the administrators, right? Or the welders, because they were good at computing. Then it became a machine. then it became a chip, then it became an algorithm, then it became a cloud, then it became, and now we're living in this era in which doing long math, I don't expect young people have any clue how to do it. Why would they? Now, you and I could look at that and go, oh my God, how can you have somebody who doesn't know their multiplication tables, right? But we evolve.
That's part of our culture as human beings. I think.
Technology, technology and money are the two areas where I'm still genuinely thinking, and not deeply at the moment, but for example, when you mentioned therapy, and I realized, that resolution of dis-ease has also got to be a part of this whole carological way of being, because the phenomenon of anxiety is part of being human. Okay, it comes from recognition of mortality, even if it's not consciously recognized. Oh, what am I? Uh-oh, shit can hit the fan.
It's always been there.
It's always going to be there. Always going to be there. And so then we live in these historical drifts, not just of social practices like let's all complain, right? Or let's all point the finger, right? Or let's all have a cousin to call and don't talk about it. But we also live in eras of technological evolution where the tools around us, this is in my pocket all day long. It wasn't in my parents' pocket. I don't know what will be in my granddaughter's pocket. They shape the kind of beings that we are. They shape the reality that we're part of. And that element, there's been philosophers working on it. I haven't done the work I need to do there yet to really integrate it into this whole carological interpretation of life. Or money, for that matter. I mean, money's it's a form of technology, it's a communicative form of technology, it's got an accumulative paradigm. There's a capitalist version of it, which is consistently seeking to increase, which is contrary to sort of the ecological, regenerative nature. Yeah, so we're alive in that era.
That's super deep, and I'm still thinking about a
Oh,
lot of things.
both of us. If you wake up at 2 a.m. and go, I know what Ron needed to hear, send me an email.
That's a good one.